Okay, welcome everyone. As we welcome in Saba, we welcome in Aaron Swade, Irving Fishbaum, Mordechai Sultan, Shelley Zeitlin, Yisrael Fisher, A.B. Spry. We welcome in Mel Zachter, Mark Frankel. Mark, welcome back. Michal, Harrison Kletzel, Avi Yament, Stephen Holtzman, Menachem Yamansky. We welcome in Dr. Guy, Nachman Chaplin, Moshe Lehman, Abe Arbach, Yitzi Muller. We welcome in Ilya Shutman, Rabbi Kranz, and Dr. Block has just joined us. And we welcome in Avram Hecht. Here, Reb Kramer is holding the fort down tonight, as I know Gedalia is at a chasana, and Barish is in Dallas, or on the way back from Dallas. It was good to have everybody who joined us for the Tillim effort. We had Baruch Hashem over here, a packed shul of men and women, showing solidarity for our Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael. The prefatory remarks that I made, I will put on TorahAnytime.com and on YouTube. We are holding now on the bottom of Daf Nun Zayin Amid Beis. We are holding by Yochel, 4 lines from the bottom of Daf Nun Zayin Amid Beis. As we
Otherwise, excuse me, can we learn for Jack and Nikki as your side was today?
Yeah, what's the name?
Hold on a second.
Yaakov Mordechai.
Yaakov Mordechai Ben Yehuda.
We'll learn the Nishmas Yaakov Mordechai Ben Yehuda, Jack Kornecki, a fine man. His neshama should have an aliyah on his yahrzeit. We are sponsored by Baruch Ian Lila Nishmas Sebastian Yaakov Chaim Ben Abba Avram Ben Shmuel HaKayin Lefu Shalema for Baruch Shlomo Ben Lina by Aaron Swade Lila Nishmas Chana Bas Shmuel, and for his sister Freda Bas Shol by Mark Frankel Lefu Shalema for Miriam Sar Bas Sipora and Chana Bas Gittel Esther by Baruch Goldwasser Vakar Satayv for what Hashem did for his family and for the Chayla Yisrael, for my Shver Avigdor Ben Rivka Meir Ben Chayesara and Yehudis Tzerel Bas Miriam. We learn, of course, for the situation in Eretz Yisrael, and as always, we begin with the Kapitel Tillim. Shalom Aloy says, Einai Elohorim, Me'ayin Yavoi Ezri Me'yim Adonai, Yosei Shemayim V'oretz, Al Yitein Lamoit Raglecha, Al Yonum Shemrecha, Hinei Lo Yonum V'lo Yishan Shemer Yisrael, Adonai Shemrecha, Adonai Tzilcha Al Yad Yeminecha, Yom Hashem Shlo Yakeka, V'yoreach Ba'loila, Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra, Yishmar Es Nafshecha, Adonai Yishmar Tzeischa V'yecha, Me'ata V'yadei Lamachinu Kol Beis Yisrael, Anisun Batzav V'shivya, Ha'im Di Me'mayam Me'mayabak V'shamak Mirachem Aleim Yitzayim, Mitzoro V'achem Afilo Oram Shibud Gulash V'golav Zman Korib V'nomar Amen. And we welcome in Richard Rosenzweig, whose son Mishan is fighting for our people, and David Gestetner. I remember Mishan as a little boy. He's not a little boy anymore now, defending our country. And Mo Kushner has joined us. It's good to have you, Mo. So we're holding 4 lines from the bottom. If you remember, we said that if you shecht chulin in the Azara, so we learned out from the pasuk ki yirchak mimcha amakam v'zavachta. When you're far away, you could slaughter chulin, but in the Beis Hamikdash you can't slaughter chulin. And we said you can't slaughter even not only if it's unblemished like a carbon, but even if it's blemished, not only a domestic animal, which could be a carbon, but even a chaya, like a deer, and not only a deer, but even a bird offering. A bird, if you shecht it, it becomes, you're not allowed to do that in the Azara. Now, I might think, Yachal lo yishchait. I might think, well, you're not allowed to do it, but v'im shachat yeh mutter. But if you did, it should be permitted. Talmud Leimer ki yirchak mimcha mokom v'zavachta v'achalta. When you're far away from the base of Mikdash and you slaughter an animal to eat, you could eat it. Only when you're far away from the Mikdash. But you cannot eat that which you slaughter inside the base of Mikdash if it's chulin. If you slaughter chulin in the temple courtyard, you can't eat it. Now here again the Gemara says, I might think that we say you can't eat it if it's unblemished. So it's like a carbon. It's something that's fit to be offered. How do I know to include even if it's blemished? Then we'll see it says v'shachat, v'shachatu, v'shachatu, so it has 3 ribuyim. So marbani bali mumin, at least it's similar to a species that could be offered up as a carbon. Shekain min hamachshe. But a menayin l'rabas that you can't eat it even if you shech as a chaya, like a deer, which cannot be a carbon. And then we have another ribuy, marbani as a chaya, I include a chaya, she b'shchita, which if it was an animal, is the procedure is shchita, kebehema. Menayin l'rabba, he says, where we don't do shchita in the base of Mikdash on birds, in the base of Mikdash we do malika. Ta'amalayim v'shachtu v'shachat oisai and v'shachat oisai. So you learn out that all 3 of these, if you shech them not berichuk mokum, not at a distance, but in the azara, you're not allowed to eat. But how do we know that you're not allowed to benefit? You can throw it to the dogs. Maybe you should be allowed to benefit, and then you would be allowed to be mekadosh and isha with it. Talmud Leimer lekelev tashlichin oso. It says by treifa that a treifa, an animal that has a fatal flaw, that you could throw to the dogs. But you can't throw to the dogs chulun that's slaughtered in the azar. Now the Gemara is going to show us that this is not universal. As we welcome in Naftali Jablin for our 26th Zoomer of the early evening. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
Ashkechinu Mar Yehuda. Mar Yehuda found l'Rav Yosef or l'Rav Shmuel Brei de Rabba bar bar Chana. He found Rav Yosef and Rav Shmuel, the son of Rabba bar bar Chana. They were standing by the doorway of the academy of Rabba, of the yeshiva of Rabba. Amalu, he said to them, Tanya, we learned in a braysa, Hamakadosh bepeter chamor, if you're makadosh with the firstborn of a donkey, with a mixture of meat and milk, or b'chulin shenishchutu ba'azara, and chulin slaughtered in the azara. Reb Shimon Aimer Mikudeshes. Reb Shimon holds it's a good Kiddushin. We already explained that Reb Shimon holds that Basar B'chalav is mutter ba'ana. So that's why if you mekadosh Basar B'chalav, it's Mikudeshes according to Reb Shimon. Also, Reb Shimon holds that the Peter Chamar, while it's alive, is also mutter ba'ana. But he also holds that chulin shenishchutu ba'azara is mutter ba'ana. Why that is, we're going to discuss in a minute. The Chachamim in all 3 ain't a mekadesh. So now the Gemara seems to imply that Reb Shimon holds that chulin shenishchutu ba'azara is only an issa d'Rabbanan. We're just afraid that people who see that you eat chulin shenishchutu ba'azara might think that kochim are disqualified. Also is permitted to benefit from. It's permitted but there are very big restrictions on kochim that are disqualified. So therefore, the Gemara assumes that according to Reb Shimon, it's only an Isser Rabban, and since it's only an Isser Rabban, that means Midaraisa, it is yours, and then an Isha would be Mikudeshes. Alma chulin shenishchutu ba'azara Reb Shimon lav daraisa. However, the Gemara says we learned not that way. V'raminu Reb Shimon Aimer chulin shenishchatu ba'azara, yisarfu has to be burnt. V'chein chaya shenishchatu ba'azara, and even a chaya that's slaughtered in the azara has to be burnt. So ishtiku, he was silent. It's a good kasha. Also the Kami de Rabbah, so they came before Rabbah and asked the question. So Amalahu Palga, this was his reference to, remember it was Yehuda, Mar Yehuda who said this, and he's referring Palga, the one who makes controversy. He's making a controversy. Yehuda is making a controversy over here. The contentious one. The one who disagrees. Ukminche, he stumped you? No, really what happens is as follows. Reb Shimon holds that kulin shenishchatu ba'azara is asur. But here, it's talking about where you shechted the chulin and you found it to be a treifa. Oh, you shechted the chulin and found it to be a treifa. According to Reb Shimon, shchita she'ena ru'uya lo yishma shchita. A shchita that doesn't render it fit to be eaten is not a good shchita. So that's why it's permitted. And that's why she would be mekudeshes. Because since it's not a good shechita, then it was not considered shechted in the azara. Oh, then it'll be permitted to benefit from. So as the Gemara explains, where you shechted the chul in the azara and you found it to be a treifa. So it wasn't a good shechita. Reb Shimon l'tamei, the Tanya HaSheichet is a treifa. If you shecht the treifa, let's say you shechted it and you knew it was a treifa, it was missing its feet. Or you found there was a perforation in the brain, in the membrane of the brain. So zev zeh chulin ba'azara, both of them, even though they were chulin in the azara, Reb Shimon matba no. Why? Because Reb Shimon holds shchita she'ena ruya lo shmei shchita, and therefore it's not really chulin shechted in the azara because it wasn't considered a shchita. The Chacham say it's also because they hold shchita she'ena ruya shma shchita, and therefore it's considered chulin ba'azara, and therefore it's also ba'ana. But regular chulin ba'azara, even Reb Shimon agrees that it is asur, and that's why it has to be burnt. Now we move into the final clause of the Mishnah.
Not afraid of Mars,
No.
People see that you should.
No. So where's Marshall when we need him? All right. Without Marshall, we use Mark. Especially since Mark played hooky. Mark, you weren't here last night, right?
I was not here.
Yeah, you see, but I just want you to know that I noticed.
Caught up, but I was not here. But I thank you for noticing.
Anyway, Mark Franco, so we said that if he takes the bus of a cholav, the Big Mac, he sells it, and then with that money he's mekadosh somebody, then the kiddushin is good. Machran v'kiddush b'domeyem mikudeshes, because the issa doesn't pass on to the money. So the Gemara says, Minola, how do we know this? I'll tell you how we know this. Midigali rachman b'avodas kechavim. The Torah reveals by idolatry, that it will be banned. Like the idolatry, if you sell a getchka, then the money is also prohibited. Kol sha'ata mahaya. Amen. Anything that comes about through the idolatry. So if you sell the idol for money, or you trade the idol for a horse, harihu kamayu, so the item that you switched for it is also usher. Oh, it's only by idolatry. Mechlal, the kol isurim shebetayra, all other isurim b'tayra, sharu. The isur doesn't pass on to the money. Says the Gemara, well, why don't we learn out from idolatry? V'neilef mina. Says, well, you know why? Mishum dav avodas kechavim u'shviyas, avodas kechavim and shmita produce are shnei ksuvim abon ke'echad, are two psukim that teach us the same thing, that if you sell it for money, if you trade it for money, the issur goes on the money as well. V'kol shnei ksuvim abon ke'echad, and if it's teaching us in two places, it's only in those two places and nowhere else, ein melamdin. Avodas kechavim hada amran, because we said v'yisa cherem kamayu, that it is forbidden like the idol itself. Shviyas maihi, yovel he, it says it is yovel, the jubilee, which is also as kedusha shviyas. Kodesh tia lachem. Oh, it's like kodesh. Ma kodesh teifus es damav, just like if you redeem hektish from money. The kedusha goes on the money. Av shviyas teifeses damer. Says Gemara. Well, if you're comparing it to kachim, then we should say that just like kachim, if you redeem it, the kedusha goes off the item and onto the money. So we should say the kedusha goes off the peiros and onto the money. Ima kodesh teifeses damer v'yoytze l'chulin. The actual item of hektish goes out l'chulin. Af shviyas teifeses damer v'yoytze l'chulin. We should say that if you switch peiros shviyas for money, the kedusha should go off the peiros, but that's not the din. Talmud Leimer tia. It says kodesh tia lachem. Tia means bav yosateh. It stays in its normal state. So if, let's say, Mark has peiros shviyas and he sells it for money, the kedusha goes on to the money, but it stays on the peiros as well. And the way it works is it always remains on the original and on the last one. So that means that if Mark has peiros and shviyas, and he switches it for meat from mel, so the kedusha stays on the peiros, and it also goes on to the meat. Then Mark switches that meat for wine. The kedusha goes off the meat and onto the wine. Then Mark switches the wine for pomegranates. The kedusha goes off the wine and onto the pomegranates. It always stays on the original fruit and on the last switch. Let's see it inside. Ketzad lokach beperish shviyas basar. If Mark buys for fruit of shviyas meat, edel ve'edel mizbarim b'shviyas. They both have to be destroyed when the fruit is not available in the field anymore. But basar dagim, then Mark switches the meat for fish. Yotza basar, the kedusha goes off the meat, nichnasu dagim, and goes on the fish. But dagim yayin, then he switches the fish for wine. Yotza dagim, nichnas yayin. But yayin shemen, then he switches the wine for oil. Yotza yayin, nichnas shemen. Ha ketzad, achrein nitfas b'shviyas. The kedusha goes on the last item. In this case, the last item was oil. Or peri atzma yasa. The fruit itself remains us. So now the Gemara says, okay, so we don't learn out that the issa goes on the money because it's shnei ksubin aban ke'echad, avodah zarah and shviyas. Ha nicha lamandi yama ein malamdin. Now you don't learn out from two psukim. Lamandi yama malamdin, that even two psukim you could learn out. We should say that the kedusha should pass over, or the issa should pass over on the money. We should learn it out from avodah zarah and shmita. Ma'ikalameima, says the Gemara mi'ute ksive. It says a miyat, a limitation, both by avodah zarah and by shmita. Ksiv acha, it says by avodah zarah ki cherem hu, it is cherem, but nothing else. V'ksiv asam yovel he, only by shmita. He in mideachrin alay, nowhere else. Okay, just getting underway on this beautiful Tuesday evening, not so beautiful with missiles flying in Eretz Yisrael. We always have to have our thoughts trained to our unfortunate brethren. You know, if you put yourself, if you're noisei ba'olam chaver, you think about one thing. People that have to go to sleep with a sleeping pill. They can't go to sleep without an Ambien. They fall into a deep sleep, and then 3 o'clock in the morning they're shaken out of their slumber, very roughly, because they have to go to the bomb shelter. They're in the bomb shelter, lulling to sleep. They're schlepped back to the house, and then they can't fall back to sleep again. And they finally fall back to sleep again, and 5:30 in the morning they're woken up again. Or imagine people with walkers having to be brought. Or imagine people in hospital beds. I mean, it just... Imagine the fright of the children. And they hear the boom of the Iron Dome. It's just a very, 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 very hard situation that our brethren find themselves in. Okay, new Mishnah. 5 lines from the beginning of the wide lines on Daf Nun Chesem and Aleph. HaMekadesh betrumais ubemaisrais ubematanais. If you're mekadesh with trumas is whether truma that's given to the kohen, or trumas maisa that's given to the kohen from the Levi, or chala, or maisas could be maisa rishon given to the Levi, or maisa ani given to the poor man on the 3rd and the 6th year. Matanis is the zroya al chayayim vakeva, the right foreleg, the cheeks, and the more that's given to the kohen. Mei chatas, efer chatas, or with the water that's mixed with the ash of the paraduma, or the ash of the paraduma. With all these things, harizu mekudeshes. She's mekudeshes, and it's true vafilu Yisrael. It's true even if Yisrael gives her truma. Now that's strange. The truma doesn't belong to him. The truma belongs to a kohen. Why should it be good if he gives her truma? Why should it be good if Yisrael gives a woman ma'aser rishon that belongs to the Levi? So the simple understanding of the Mishnah, which is not going to be the maskana of the understanding, but the simple understanding of the Mishnah is that our Mishnah holds toivas hana mammon. And therefore, if Mark, who is certainly a Yisrael from Bela Kinwood, did I pronounce that right? All right, so I was close. Bala Kinwood. Okay, it's like Babylon.
I am Yisrael though, Rabbi.
Huh? Okay.
I am Yisrael.
1 out of 2 ain't bad. But you also weren't here. That's 2 out of 3. But anyway, why should I rub it in? Why should I keep on saying that you weren't here last night? Why should I bring that up, that Mark wasn't here last night? Did I mention that you weren't here last night?
What'd you say?
Okay, Mel is catching the drift. So the simple reason why Mark would be able to be mekadesh a woman with truma, even though he has to give it to a kohen, and he can't eat it. A zor can't eat it. It's a chiyuv misa b'dei shemayim. The reason is it has a value because he could choose which kohen to give it to. So when he gives it to her, she could choose which kohen. But there is an argument whether toivas hana is considered a marketable item, it's considered mammon or not. So it seemed from our Mishnah that toivas hana is mammon. That's why Mark could be mekadesh with truma even though he's not a kohen, and with ma'aser rishon even though he's not a Levi, and with ma'aser ani even though he's not an ani. Says the Gemara, Amar Ula, but Ula opens up the discussion by telling us that it's not a marketable item. Toivas hana ain't a mammon. It's not considered money. Well, if it's not considered money, then how could Mark be mekadesh an isha with it? Esrei Rabbi Abba, we say, I'm a Kaddish with Trumas, and Maisis, and Matanis, and Mechatis, and Efer Para. If you're a Kaddish with Trumas, with Maisris, with the Zohar Chayam, with Keva, with the Mechatis, with the Efer Chatish, Harizuma Kadeshes, Mafilu Yisrael, even a Yid. And if you're going to say Tovis Hanai a Mammon, then what did Mark give her? He can't eat it. She can't eat it. Amalei, you see, Mark had a maternal grandfather who was a Kohen. And he inherited from his maternal grandfather, the Kohen, he inherited crops. And we hold that even though his grandfather didn't remove the truma, but matonish hurmu, even if it wasn't physically removed, kamisha hurmadamian, it's like it was removed. And since he was a kohen, it belonged to him. And now, when he transmitted it to Mark, it belongs to Mark. Oh, now, even though Mark is a Yisrael, he owns this truma. And therefore he doesn't have to give it to Kain. He can't eat it, but he could sell it to a Kain. So it has almost its full value. And then he could be Mekadisho with it, because she could then sell it to a Kain. Says, Yisrael should not like tfalim mebeis avi imoy Kain. It's talking about where he had non-tithe produce falling from his maternal grandfather who was a Kain. And the grandfather, even though he didn't separate the truma, it's as if it was already his, because savar matonish lo yormu kamisha ormadamian, and therefore it was already like it was the grandfather's, and therefore Mark was Yerush. Says the Gemara, "Boy minei Reb Chia bar Avin." Going back to the initial question, "Boy minei Reb Chia bar Avin Ravuna toivus anamam and ayin amaman." The fact that Mark could decide which kohen to give it to, is that considered like having equity in it? And with that equity, it could be Mekadosh and Isha or not. Amalei Tanitua, we learned in the Mishnah, Mekadosh b'trumas b'maisus b'matanas b'meichatas b'efer par. If you're Mekadosh a woman with truma, like trumas meiser or regular truma or chala, with meiser rishon or meiser ani, with the zohar chayim mekeva, with the water mixed with the ash of the paraduma, and the ash of the paraduma, harizuma kadeshes, and vafilu Yisrael, even though Mark is Yisrael. But how could he be Mekadosh? It must be that the fact that he could choose which kohen to give to is equity, and he's being Mekadosh with that equity. Amalei, so he said to him, V'lavu kimna, didn't we say, Ravuna said to Rav Chia bar Avin, V'lavu kimna, didn't we establish that that's talking about B'Yisrael shenaflu like tfalim mebeis avi imay kayin? That that's talking about where Mark inherited from his maternal grandfather was a kayin, so that he actually owned the truma. So, what was Rav Chia's? What was Rav Huna's response? Amalei hutzat. Now, literally, hutzat means you're outside. You're out of bounds. So, ichsaf. So, he was embarrassed. Rav Chia bar Avin was embarrassed. He thought he was saying, "Hu savar mishmaitza kamalei," that he was outside the clear understanding of the Gemara. Amalei, so Rav Chia told him, Ravuna told him, no. I meant Tachi Kamina, Rav Asi to Hutzal. Hutzal, it was a reference of Hutzal. Rav Asi from the city of Hutzal, Koikavasek, Hitaka holds that it's talking about where Mark inherited from his maternal grandfather. And it's no raya that Toivus Hano is considered equity. So now the Gemara wants to bring a raya, name a kitanoi. Let's say it's dependent on the following machloikis tanoi. Hagoynev tivloi shel chaveira. Now here, who would do such a thing? Who would do such a thing? Mark. I don't want you to miss Marshall too much.
Where's Marshall?
Yeah, where are you, Marshall? Get on the phone. Tell him he's missing.
Check the hockey games.
It's very likely Marshall might have organized maybe some Tillim in his shul or something. Or maybe the Tillim for the Blackhawks. So anyway, and by the way, Rabbi Say, tomorrow night, I already have such a special shir on Bereshis prepared, so don't forget, after the daf, shir on Bereshis. So, what happened is Mark stole from Rabbi Kranz. He stole his untithed produce. Inside the tithed produce is, of course, truma, but it wasn't separated yet. So he stole the untithed produce from Dr. Black. Mishalem loy demei tivloi shel chaveira. He has to pay the full amount. If it's a kav of wheat, he has to pay for the full kav of wheat, including the truma that's inside it. Divrei Rebbe. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yudai, me'einu mishalem ela demei chulin shabai. He doesn't have to pay for the truma because that doesn't belong to Dr. Black. He's not a kohen. He only has to pay for the part of the kav that represents the chulin, which Dr. Black gets to keep. So the Gemara says, "My laba kamiflagi." The Gemara says, "Toivus hana." One holds that the fact that Dr. Black could decide who to give the truma to means he has equity in the truma too. So that's why you have to pay for everything. No, that's not considered equity, and therefore you only have to pay. I said Dr. Black, didn't I say Rabbi Kranz? I'm getting mixed up, right? And therefore, since Rabbi Kranz has no equity, so therefore he only has to pay him for the chulin. Says Gemara, the kuli alma toivasana einamam. Everybody holds that that's not equity. However, it's talking about where Rabbi Kranz inherited it from his maternal grandfather, who was a kohen. Oh, but then it depends, did his maternal zayda ever actually possess the truma? Because it wasn't separated. And the question is, where if it wasn't separated, is it considered as if it was separated? So if it was separated, then his grandfather acquired it, because he was a kohen, and then he transmitted it to Rabbi Kranz, so then Rabbi Kranz owns everything. So then our resident thief, Mark, has to pay for everything. Omar Savar, Lav Kamishor Medamian, and one holds that it's not as if it was separated. If it's not as if it was separated, then Rabbi Kranz's grandfather never acquired it, and therefore Rabbi Kranz doesn't inherit the truma part, and therefore Mark only has to compensate him for the chulin part. And it's not talking about where Rabbi Kranz's grandfather was a kohen. But there's another reason why Mark might have to reimburse him for everything. Because we hold like Shmuel that chita achas preteris sakri. Even though a midah beinus is to give truma a 50th, but even one blade of wheat exempts the whole thing. And since even one blade of wheat exempts the whole thing, so then Mark has to pay for everything. We ignore the one blade. V'acha b'dishmul kamifligi. Dam Shmuel chita achas peiteres asakri. Demar islay the Shmuel. One holds like Shmuel that one blade exempts, so then everything else was owned by Rabbi Kranz, and therefore he has to pay him for everything else. Umar leslay the Shmuel. V'bayisema dekuli ama leslu the Shmuel. Nobody holds like Shmuel that one blade would exempt the whole thing. But what's the reason of the Mandiyama that says that he has to pay Rabbi Kranz for everything? The Rebbe, the Kansur Rabbanon Leganev. The Rabbanon of Kindness Deganev, Mark, he shouldn't have stole, so they make him pay for everything. Right? What's a night without giving Mark a knas? The Iba Yisema, or else, this is another way to look at it yet, 2 lines into the wide lines. The Iba Yisema, the Kuli Al Meislu de Shmuel. And since everybody holds of Shmuel, really Mark should have to pay for everything except for one blade of wheat. So what's the maniyama that says he doesn't have to pay for the truma? Oh, here we throw the book at Rabbi Kranz. Because he shouldn't have waited so long from separating the truma. That we say that Mark only has to pay for the chulin, the Kansur Rabbanon Balabayas, because we penalize Rabbi Kranz, the loy baile, the shuya, the tivla, he shouldn't have kept it in the untied state. You're not supposed to do that. Chazaka chaver sheinem mites mitachas yadei davar sheinem esuken, and therefore that's why we only make him pay the amount of the chulin. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, HaMekadesh b'trumas u'b'maises u'b'matanas b'meichatas u'b'efer para. Now this is unusual. This is unusual even for Mark. He's a Mekadesh, a woman with the water of the ash of the paraduma, or the ash of the paraduma, and she's Mekadeshes. V'afal pi Yisrael, v'reminu, ha'noitel schar ladoin. If Avi, he's a dayan, and he takes from the litigants pay to judge them, dinoi betelem. We say that the decision is nullified. Laha'id, witnesses that took money to testify, eidusai betela. Lahazois ulekadesh meimav, to spray the water of the paraduma, or to mix the water with the ash, that disqualifies it too. We say, then, meimav meimara, the water is just like regular cave water, the ephra mikla, and the ash is just like ash from the oven. So you see, you can't charge. Now, if you can't charge, then how could Mark be mekanish with it? Says the Gemara, Mark can't charge to spray, and he can't charge to mix the water, but he can charge for transporting the ash, and he can charge to draw the water from the river. Says the Gemara, from the fresh water. To transport the ash, because they need it in different places to be matar tmei mesim, or milui, and to draw the water from the mayon in order to make the mixture, that you could charge for. Kan b'schar azov a kiddush, to charge for the spraying and the actual mixing with ash and water, that you can't charge for. And dekenami diktoni hocha b'meichatas, the water of the chatas, in other words, to draw the water, or be'efa para, and to transport the ash. Diktoni hosam lahaza yisul kadesh, you can't do it with spraying and actually mixing the ash with the water. Shmamina, that's a good chilik. Hanru lacha ish mekadesh. Hanru lacha ish mekadesh. Hanru lacha ish mekadesh. Now, if, let's say Yisrael tells Mel, say the Kaddish li Isha Ploinus. See that girl over there? Her name is Rivka Spinzer. Go and be Mekadosh for me, Rivka Spinzer. And when Mel gets there, he really takes a liking to Rivka Spinzer. So instead of being Mekadosh her for Yisrael, he takes her for himself. Nice guy, huh? Halach v'kitchel atzmai. Boy, I spared you on this one, Mark. Halach v'kitchel atzmai. Mel went ahead and was Mekadosh her for himself. The din is Mekadesh's l'sheni. Mel gets away with it. Mel could opt not to do the shlichus. Yisrael told him to do Rivka Shpinza, I like her. Mekadosh. Mel went there and he liked her. So Mel was Mekadosh her for himself. Mekadesh's l'sheni. V'cheina aimer le'isha. Now the Gemara gives us, Mishnah gives us another case. Ha'aimer le'isha hari'at mekadesh's li la'achar shloishim yom. So what happened over here is Shelley says to Zisel, you should be mekadeshes to me after 30 days. And here comes Mark. Let's not take him out of the picture. Mark is mekadesh Zisel tomorrow. Mekadeshes l'sheni. Mark gets in first because Shelley said should only be mekadeshes after 30 days. Mark says, I can't give up this Zisel. She's a Zisel. And he takes her after a day. So Mark gets her. And therefore, Bas Yisrael l'kayin, if she was a Bas Yisrael and Mark was a kayin, teichel b'truma. Oh, but now, here the plot thickens. If Shelley says, me'achshavu la'achar shloishim yom, Shelley says to Zisel, you should be mekudeshes to me from now in 30 days. And then and Mark said that she should be mekudeshes to him right away. So here mekudeshes ve'ena mekudeshes. Here we're not exactly sure what Shelley meant, and therefore she's partly mekudeshes both to Shelley and to Mark. And therefore Bas Yisrael l'kayin, if one of them is a kayin, she can't eat truma. Or Bas kayin l'Yisrael, or if she was a kayin who ate truma from our home, and one of them is Yisrael, l'teichel b'truma. Now, really, we would think that if Shelley says from now in 30 days, and Mark says now, we would think Mark is out of the picture. Because after 30 days, it's retroactive to when Shelley said it, which was before Mark opened his mouth. So we would think that Mark is out. So we'll have to see in the Gemara why we say that it has a quasi status. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it in the Gemara. Now, let's get back to what Mel did. I don't think you could forget what Mel did. Yisrael told Mel to be Mekadesh Rachel Sprinza, and Mel, instead of doing it for Rabbi Yisrael, who made him a shliach, Mel took her for himself. So the Gemara says, well, Mel gets her, but he's not a nice guy. Says the Gemara, this is only fictitious because Mel is a very nice guy, but if Yisrael tells Mel to be Mekadesh her, and Mel takes her for himself, Tana, Masha Asa Asi, what Mel did, he got away with. Elashinog by Minigramoyes. He acted in a devious way. That's the way of loving her Arami. That's a Ramai. No, that's not a trustworthy person. And the Gemara says that's also implicit in the words of our Mishnah. Because it says, V'holach v'kitcha la'atzmai. And Mel went and was mekadosh for himself. Tani didin halach nami diktani. When it says Mel went, halach b'ramayis. He went with deviousness. That's not the way. If Yisrael made you a shliach Mel for himself, Mel shouldn't have chapped it on for himself and not for Yisrael. Okay, Rabbi Isai, dealing with all of these nefarious individuals is getting me a little tired. We're going to learn the Mishnah Yomis now. Again, I want to remind you that the Shir prefatory remarks to Tillim for Eretz Yisrael will be on, it's already on Kalalash, no it's not, it's already on Facebook, but it will be on Torah Anytime and YouTube later on. By the way, check out, on YouTube I already have 3 interesting shiurim on Bereshis. There's 2 years ago shir, the first year here in Fairways, is a shir all the way back to 5775 and 5777 that I gave at Rabbi Landau's shul. 2 very fascinating shiurim. That's on YouTube. If you haven't used YouTube yet, please remember to subscribe. And we're going to learn the Mishnah Yomis now.